All right.
Start recording.
Start recording. Welcome to Port Jefferson Civic Association, our regular meeting. We are a voluntary organization run entirely by volunteers. The purpose of the organization is to promote civic engagement and welfare of our larger or smaller area. To be a member, you need to be either a resident of Port Jeff Village.
Thank you. Now I can hear.
Soon we're going to start sweat. In order to be a member, you need to be a resident of Port Jefferson's Village, Port Jefferson School District, or Port Jefferson Fire Department. Fire District, not Fire Department, yes. We're always looking for volunteers. If you have an issue that you particularly care about, please come to us, please come to the meetings, please speak up about it, and lead the way about addressing those issues, because we are 5 of us on the board. I am Anna Khazanova, the president of the Civic Association. Our vice president, Holly Filzame, unfortunately is unwell today. We have our treasurer, Marilyn Damascus. We have our recording secretary, Janice Fleischman, and we have Kathleen McLean, who is our correspondent secretary / outreach officer. Don't kill me. First, we will hear the reports from the officers, and then we have 2 wonderful guests today. We have chairman of Zoning Board of Appeals in the Planning Department, who will talk about their experiences on the boards, what kind of decisions, what kind of limitations to their decisions that they're experiencing, and how we as residents can provide our feedback about things that are happening in the village. Marilyn, do you want to give us an update about our finances?
Okay, so I don't have a printout. I'm waiting for certain receipts to come in from expenses that we've had from last meeting. I'm waiting on those receipts. So I'm giving you an approximate. We have about $1,700 in the account. I will have an accurate accounting once we have those receipts turned in. Okay, but that's what we have at the moment, okay? And I really appreciate everyone's membership towards our civic association. It's important. Thank you.
Janice, do you want to give us an update on yours?
Yes. So I'm heading the Walkability Committee as part of the Port Jefferson Civic Association, and we are moving ahead with looking at grants. We are being visited by New York State Traffic Coalition Executive Director at our next meeting. Please come. Cynthia Brown, she's going to give a presentation. There was a walkability study that Port Jefferson did called the Haydick Engineering Walkability Study 2023, and we're hoping for the next step in that study demonstration project, and hoping to get funds to make this I think it's a 3-mile village walkable from end to end. The streets that connect us, the neighborhoods that connect us, the double yellow line roads that all of the neighborhoods go into, where you have to drive to get to the train station, all the hubs of the village, the train station, the main street, the ferry, the hospital. Yeah, that too. Yeah. Schools. We're trying to, families want to live in a walkable village, they want to walk to school. It doesn't feel safe. There's narrow roads without shoulders, double yellow lines, lots of traffic, no sidewalks. So stay tuned for a lot of information coming at the next meeting. A new committee was born, it was birthed, and it's called the Quality of Life Committee. And people that are really have been disturbed by noise pollution and light pollution are coming together, becoming expert in those subjects, and deciding what to do about that together. And John Russell stepped up, and he's going to run the committee. And we have 5 people, I believe. Al Kasari, who's here. John Russell, who's not. Caroline Gordon, who's here. And Leila Bernardi, that's not. But they have their first, the second meeting is already scheduled. And yeah, that's my report. Marilyn's on the walkability, Bob Larrabee's on walkability, and Michael Schwarting, and we always want help and information, whatever you're experiencing with pedestrian safety. Thank you.
Just mention July 14th.
July 14th is that next meeting where the New York State Traffic Coalition will be presenting.
Yes,
Next meeting, July 14th, we will have a guest speaker. Today's relatively short reports from the officers, so we can get directly to our guests. So we have Ray DiBiase, who is the chairman of the Port Jefferson Planning Board. And we have Mark Brosnan, who is the head of the chair of the Zoning Boards of Appeals. Can you please come up here and let's have the conversation. I'll have a chance to grill you. Not that I plan to grill you. Let's start with the planning board, because that's the first place where people mainly come in if they want to build something, if they want to move, do something, and this falls within the general law or general guidelines that the village code allows. In a few sentences, describe what's your experience being on the board, what are kind of decisions that limit or what kind of frames limit your decisions, and what kind of issues do you need to consider?
Well, we consider all types of planning issues, and we get applications in for new developments, so to speak. This happens frequently at a meeting. We're reviewing sometimes several applications. Some of you may have seen the apartments going up uptown. There's applications for future apartments going uptown as well. So we review these applications, and we review them in terms of what it says in the village code, and also attached to the village code, Mark can talk about it a little bit, is the zoning of the property. So if you have a particular property in a particular area, what's the zoning? What's allowed there right now? There's a zoning map that's on the village website. You probably want to take a look at that. I don't know that it's the latest. I think it's been updated.
They're in the process of updating it now, yes.
Yeah. Excuse me. So we're looking at a project with respect to the village code and the zoning. Also, the State Environmental Quality Review Act, called SECRA. You might have heard people talk about it. What type of environmental impacts could there be from a project? Is there an impact on water quality, air quality, traffic? There's a whole scenario of issues that need to be addressed. When the applicant fills out an application, he has to put down his opinion of his impact on all those items. That gets reviewed by the planning department staff, and then that input is provided to the planning board, and then we review the various environmental aspects of the project as well. Maybe just a little bit about the board. The board is made up of all village residents. Each member of the board serves for a 5-year term. The village planning board is appointed by the board of trustees. We all have individual terms now. It used to be everybody's term expired at the same time, I think, unless you took over a term. So now each person expires in a different year, so that there's some gradual turnover, if necessary, because a lot of people get reappointed. And I want to say that we have a very good board, because I think the shortest serving member has probably been on for about 7 years. So it's a continual thing, which is good because we kind of get the history, even though most of us are longtime residents of the village, we get the history of what's happening in the village, and we can have that perspective in making decisions on applications that come in. So, and I just want to say that the board members had various experience. There's a woman on the board, Laura Zimmerman, who's got a structural engineering background in terms of buildings and foundations and things like that, which is important. And she also participated in managing some businesses, so she's got that business aspect as well. We have Barbara Sabatino. A lot of you may know Barbara. Barbara's been a resident for I don't know how many decades. It's a long, long time. She knows everything that's going on in the history of the village. But she also ran a business, which she sold a couple of years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago now. We have Gil Anderson, who's a retired commissioner in the Suffolk County Department of Public Works. So he's experienced in highway engineering and other things that the Department of Public Works had to develop and review. And we also have, why am I forgetting?
Lee Brosnan.
Lee Brosnan.
Thank you. That's right, Lee is the newest member, so he hasn't been on the board. He's only been on the board newly appointed. Everybody else has probably 7 years of experience, but Lee was a trustee of the village, and he has a lot of experience as a developer of properties and projects. So we've got various perspectives. Myself, I worked 50 years as an engineer for an engineering firm on Long Island. I have a background, it's civil engineering, but I have a background specifically in traffic engineering and transportation planning. So we've got a lot of experience and a lot of perspective on the board. I don't know if I answered your question because I went off on a sidebar.
The question was, yes, you did answer.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, let's look at Mr. Mark.
The zoning board. Like Ray said, every piece of property in the village has a zone. Your house has a zone, whether it's mostly your old residential zones. So why would you come in front of the zoning board? The zoning board is a 5-member board, and you would come in front of me in relief of the code. Most common thing we see is people either want to put in, they go for a building permit and they either want to do a new retaining wall, a pool, or they discover that a structure on their property is either too close to the property line or in conflict with what they thought. So then you would come to me, you would come to my board, and we would offer you the opportunity to get an area variance. You would be sent to me from the planning department, not the planning board. At which point you would sit in front of my board and you'd present your case. Contrary to popular belief, you do not need an expediter. You do not need to hire someone for most matters. You can sit with the planning department. They would go over with you what's needed to be met, and at which time you can present us the information that you have. We're required by law for an area variance, which is 95% of the variances that we see, to meet 5 requirements. First requirement is whether the benefit can be achieved by another means. So, can you put that pool or that new structure somewhere else? You would give us a reason why you couldn't do that. Would it present an undesirable change to the neighborhood? For example, if you want to put a pool in, you'd say, well, there's 10 pools in my neighborhood. You know, I live in a neighborhood, and all you'd have to do is give us an aerial and show it, as long as it's a similar situation. Whether the request is substantial. Substantial could be, you're taking up 95% of your property with the pool. It's really by case basis, depending on what the variances you're asking for. Whether the request would have an adverse impact on the physical or environmental characteristics. For example, if you're putting retaining walls in, are you now shedding water onto your neighbor's property or something along those lines? And the last one is whether the difficulty is self-created. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. You do not need to have a yes or affirmative answer on all 5 of those. That's not a requirement. We look at them on a cumulative basis, and then the board will make a decision. Similar with Ray, I have 5 members on my board. I'm an engineer by trade. I have 2 lawyers, I have a real estate agent, and I have a IT person on the board. And again, then the other thing that you would come for me, which most of you would never come for me unless you're doing a business, would be a use variance. You wanted to change your property from residential to, for example, residential to commercial, or one level of commercial to another level, depending on what you're looking to build. In that case, the criteria is much stringent and very few people meet the criteria. I'm not saying it's never happened, but in all the years I've been on the board, and I'm 15 plus years on the board, I have never seen us, no one's ever been able to meet the criteria. A few people have come close, but have not met the criteria. And just to elaborate on what Ray said, we're also a volunteer board. Although we're appointed by the village board, we're volunteer and we're independent from the village board. So the decisions we make are independent of the village board or any type of outside influence other than the code that we're required to follow.
One thing I could add about the planning board, you might say, well, why is the downtown area developing the way it is? Why is the zoning the way it is? Every 20 years, or this is a New York State guideline, every 20 years, every municipality should develop a comprehensive plan, which outlines the plans for the next 20 years. So we're working off the comprehensive plan from, that's dated to 2030, but it went into effect, it was supposed to go into effect in 2010. So you have a 20-year plan to make changes and implement things. Not that you have to update your plan every 20 years, but it's a strongly suggested recommendation by the state. There's one municipality on Long Island that's updating their plan now. It's a township on Long Island. And you think about all the growth in Suffolk County in the last 50 years, 60 years. Their plan was in the late 70s. It's now being updated for the first time. So they probably should have done some work on that before then, but that's the case. So the next plan is going to be the 2050 plan. Ideally, you'd like to get the plan into effect by 2030. So they have that 20-year window to make changes. Why should the plan be updated? Some good reasons are climate change. We've had more frequent and more intense storms. Even that alone might be the reason for it. But also, what's the growth been in the village over the last 20 years? This is a process that takes probably 3 years to implement, because typically an outside planning consultant is hired by the municipality and develops the plan with extensive public input. So that's your chance to actually go to the public hearings and come down and make your points known, so that the comments can be taken into consideration when the plan is developed. This is what happened when we did the plan, the 2010 plan. I don't think it got adopted. It was a couple of years late, and it got adopted maybe 2013. So it was off on a late start. But we did have a lot of public input, and we took every comment seriously and developed a plan based on that. So typically, the idea for the village would be to get a grant to do the plan, because they have to pay a consultant, and it's very expensive, because this covers all aspects. Very expensive. So it would be ideally to work on getting a state grant to actually pay for most, if not all, of the plan. It's
And just to touch on Ray's comment about having input, if you can't make one of our meetings, and our meetings are not always convenient because everybody's got things going on in their life, I encourage you to either send an email, you can drop a letter off. We're required by any correspondence that we receive, we're required to read into the record. Anything we do is foilable. There's very few exceptions to that, but it is foilable. On things that are going on, you're welcome to go down and ask the planning department to see the current file. If it's an active file, I know in planning, we don't get it as much on zoning. But if you do have a letter of concern, support, or opposition, you can send an email in. You can contact Cindy Suarez, who is both the secretary for both Ray and I, and send her an email, and we will read it into record. And just like Ray said, my board takes every comment seriously, and we do take it into consideration when making our decision.
And if there's a significant project that requires a public hearing, which means it's got a significant change, maybe the zoning is being changed, or there's enough variances in the project, anticipated variances that you might, would trigger a public hearing, that's another opportunity. We have public hearings pretty much on every agenda. I mean, some of those projects are very small, but we probably average 1 or 2 a month. So that's a good opportunity to come down and voice your opinion. And of course, we're virtual, we're online, on the website. And we also have if you watch the meeting at home, you have 2 weeks to send in any comments. You may not physically be able to get down to the meeting, but you can mail in comments or drop them off at the planning department.
One of the things that is really interesting is like you're governed by a code, but there are certain limitations of what you can and cannot do. And I remember in one of the conversations you and I had at some point way back when, was that there's sometimes codes in conflict with one another. It's not perfectly synchronized as a part of it. Can you give an example of maybe you've experienced the same, where like certain priorities conflict with one another? Maybe as a part of a project, maybe initially you would look at it and you would think that's actually not a conflict, but now that you're considering that, maybe how do you balance those different priorities?
Well, I know for myself, and Ray sees this as well, is that sometimes someone might start out with, a commercial piece of property needing 4 or 5 variances. Either the planning board, the planning department, or ourselves may look at it, and if you can either reconfigure something, change something that might eliminate a conflict, where you may need a certain setback or a certain square footage by changing things, there's ways to do that. So usually what the planning board does is looks at the application, starts out with an initial need of either variances or changes, and then they'll do their best to shape the project that will need the least amount of variances and possibly the least amount of, whether it's a use change or a variance, and then at some point it'll go to Ray, and then Ray's board will either forward it to me or make some more changes, and then it'll go to me, and then it may go back to Ray for final approval.
Right. We may even have, the planning board may have some suggestions on the design of a project. Let's say where a parking lot is located on the side of a building, we may say, hey, put it in the back, so it's out of sight, and it gives you better access to the building itself. So we get preliminary submissions, particularly on large projects, where there's a whole preliminary site layout. We say, boy, you've got the right size building, but you got it in the wrong spot. So move it around and put the parking in another spot. So this will give better traffic access, better access for pedestrians. Move doorways to corners where they shouldn't be, where they could serve multiple businesses maybe in the building. So things like that.
We also accept comments from the ARC, which is a commission, the Public Safety Commission. We'll get comments from DPW. And I'm sure I'm missing some more of them as well. But we'll get written, whether they're comments to the zoning board or the planning board, and they'll make comments on everything from the type of siding to things like Ray said, changing a location of a parking lot, or moving a building back to accommodate fire, or access around a building so that we can get fire trucks through there. Some people don't take into account for the size of a fire truck. Fire trucks are very large; they need a big turn radius. So. They may need either bigger driveways, access all the way around a building, because a fire truck cannot do a 3-point turn in any type of parking lot. So we do take comments from them, and we do, again, take them seriously. They affect Ray's applications a little more than mine most of the time, but we do get them, and we do take them seriously.
And when an application comes in, the planning department has a whole checklist, planning a building, of who should get copies of the application for comments. These include public utilities, Suffolk County Water, electric, gas, utility companies, as well as if a project is within 500 feet of the village border, that goes to the Suffolk County Planning Commission, because they have jurisdiction in that regard, because why should one municipality have a tremendous project right on the border and the other one is not commented? it's a county-wide comment, but also the other municipality gets the comment as well on that project, because it's so close and it could impact both sides of the village boundary.
You said ARC, I didn't know what ARC.
Architectural Review Committee.
Ah,
Yeah, we've gotten some really very good comments from the ARC, and they're very, very quick and very concise, and they have, not only do they talk about what a building should look like and where the windows should be, they give you a rendering in a memo. I don't know if you've seen this.
Yeah.
In a memo, pages, of the building should look like this. Move this window here, you better, and it's, I'm not an architect, so, I don't really understand some of the comments they make, but they're always well received. And usually the developer or the applicant that puts the project in for approval is very willing to make the changes, because they really can't argue against them.
I mean, as a village, we have a very unique, and I'm sorry, sir, we have a very unique village in the fact that we have two major hospitals, we have a ferry, we have a train, we have county roads running through, state roads running through, so every decision is not simple in the fact that you have to account everyone else's comments, curb cuts, where to put things, why we're doing it, why allowing a relief to something, so there's a lot of, and then take the fact that this village is one big hill in most places, it's, not that any of us know anything about that, but yes, so it's, there's always something, there's always a unique component to almost every application.
2 more questions before I'll open it up for everyone. One of them is partially a big part of the reason why the Civic Association actually in existence is the Mather Hospital project, and the variance that was given to exceed the amount of the clearance allowed and how it was managed. I'm not here to grill you about that. What I'm really interested about, because part of the reason why it was so galvanizing for the community was the 2 acres of the forest that was lost. And when I was walking and I was talking to people, one of the issues, very sticky issues that kept coming up, is the fact that when, for example, a zoning board application is considered, or when the planning board one part of the code is rarely enforced in the village, which is the clearance and the amount of vegetation that needs to be present on the plots, and whether it's actually being respected. Do you have any comments on that, or whether that factors into your decisions at all?
Are you talking about when you say it's rarely enforced, like some people might overclear?
Yes.
Yep.
Most often that's the case.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, I moved into a house that had been overcleared to the adjacent property, so that the neighbor's view would be of my house. So they were required before they were caught, and the builder was required to do some plantings, replant the area, and put some screening into the adjacent property. So in most cases, that's checked by the planning department. When we get the application, the planning department reviews a lot of things before we get it. So they've already checked, and they usually give us a memo of what they found, which is very helpful to the planning board, because they do all the background work on that. So they'll check clearing limit, they'll check slopes of the property. That's a big issue in the village because of the topography and the bold shape to it. Where water runs down, could cause erosion, can cause structural damage, and also you don't want to clear in that property because you're losing the trees and the soil that prevents the water from coming down. So normally that's all checked by the planning board before we get it. But we'll ask questions about it. We may have some different solutions where people have to put up retaining walls. Sometimes where the slopes are so severe, they'll have to put up a concrete retaining wall. That gets reviewed not only by the planning department, but the building department as well, because of a certain height wall gets reviewed for structural capacity, and calculations get checked to make sure that the wall can actually hold back the slope.
So that's part of the structural, but like when you review your plans, you do check for the vegetation, making sure that the builder actually
Yes.
complies with the.
Yes.
the code.
Normally, the clearing limit is indicated on the, and a lot of times if it's in question, if it's close, we'll say, hey, indicate the area that's to be cleared around the development on, with a dashed line or something similar on the plan, and, you know, this will enable the planning department to really check it closely, because you think maybe 60% of the site gets cleared. You look at a plan, you may not think, is this right? Is it, you know, you really need maybe some more detailed information.
And just to touch on that, Ray or I, we don't have enforcement capabilities. That's done by the building inspector. Usually a CO is contingent on planting unless there's a seasonal issue or something like that. So Ray or myself make conditions on approval, but we don't enforce it. The building department enforces it. I just want to make that clear. Although we may say what we want, we're not out there. The planning department won't issue a CO or a final approval until this work is done, or with vegetation it might be seasonal, so you might have to wait to see it, but most of the time it's enforced by the building department. So.
All right. And the last question from me before I open it up to others is that apartments. So many times when I walk and talk to people, or when I interact with others, the one of the first comments is like, what I want to change in the village, I want the apartments to be gone, or I don't want any more new apartments. I know you can't voice a stance of whether it's possible or not. What people can do to voice their opposition, and how much weight is there in being saying, like, I don't want the apartments? Is that even feasible?
That's a difficult topic. Because the comprehensive plan spent a lot of time uptown and determining how many apartments could be had uptown, or how much could that area support. And they actually came up with a number, a maximum number of apartments. We're not close to, with the projects that are built, and there's some in the works, we're not close to that number.
What's
yet.
the number?
Number is, I believe it's close to 500 apartments
500
in the uptown area. I don't know, I don't want to guess at what the number that's already been constructed or that's been proposed, exact number, but it's not close to the 500, believe it or not. And that was something that was in the comprehensive plan, so that evolved into the zoning that was done up there. And it's hard to go against the comprehensive, you can't go against the comprehensive, we can't make a decision that it's contrary to the comprehensive plan. So that's why it's important, if and when we do our update in 2030 for the year 2050, up to the year 2050, that we get public input. Because I don't want to say we're bound with both hands, we're bound maybe with one hand behind our back and trying, when we say, we can't change the zoning, and we can't change what established the zoning in the uptown area, so to speak, because the comprehensive plan said all that. So we're, you know, when you say, people say, oh, you're planners, you should understand that, you know, maybe there's too much up there now, there's too much traffic, or that too was addressed in the comprehensive plan as well. So, you know, that's why we encourage public input. And, you know, and you know from Mather that we took all public comments and we addressed them, and I think that was done virtually, if I remember, during COVID. Yeah.
It's COVID. Yeah.
Like Ray said, we're kind of bound by the code, and it's really your input that can either dictate changes to the code in the comprehensive plan, but the stuff that comes in is usually as of right. So when an application comes into either the planning board or the zoning board, it's an as of right, unless they come for a change of use. I haven't seen any uptown changes of use in the pipeline at all. So even like, I think Conifer, which was the train station, that was an as of right. I think we combined a few lots and made apartments there. The apartments look nice, better than, we had a bar that we had issues with, and shootings and other things. I don't disagree or agree with apartments. We just go with what the zoning is and the as of right. We can change things as far as how close to the street line it is, how far back it is. Again, in line with the walkable communities, trying to design the building so that we have large enough sidewalks, whether we set it back or up on the street, whether we have retail on the bottom or professional office is really just what the comprehensive plan calls for. So, again, you know, we like Ray said, we have one hand tied by it because we got to follow the code, but when the comprehensive plan comes up, I advise you to speak up, whether it's through writing, in person, and let everyone know what your thoughts are, and you know, and then we can go from there.
Did you have a question? Go ahead.
And the 2030 plan undo previous plan regarding apartments?
It's not necessarily undo it, but could change it, yeah. It
Okay.
could say, hey, this entire area was supposed to be apartments with, when I say apartments, it's mixed use, as Mark said. On the first floor, the idea
Right.
was to have retail on the
Right.
first floor, retail or offices. And then on the floors above, apartments. But you could, in a subsequent plan, you could say, we took another look at this, and based on a lot of things, based on traffic, based on some other items, as well as public opinion, because public opinion is a weighted thing in a company. It's taken into consideration significantly. I mean, that's the purpose of the whole public hearing. We had, I can't remember if we had 1 or 2 public hearings on the comprehensive plan. So we like to see a big turnout, but this is very important. But
So
yes,
enough
you
people
can,
voice the
you
fact
can
that
say,
there's
exactly, yeah.
too many
Yeah.
apartments already,
Yeah.
it could be changed,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, and if, not only expressing that opinion, but saying, hey, we just feel like this, like, give the reasons for it. Too much traffic, too much, you know, other things that enter into it. Traffic just comes into my head as a first one, but,
Right.
yeah. I mean, as planners, we would say, hey, maybe it's too much up there, but, you know, we're bound by certain things to right off the bat, to follow.
Oh, well, I guess, with the exception of maybe the ferry company, I haven't seen much office. Is that a trend with working home and all that?
Yeah.
And you haven't seen many applications for new office
No,
buildings?
it's, you're right, and that's another thing, besides climate change, COVID was a big impact, and also, you know, it has permanent impact in terms of people working at home, like you said.
Have you seen any requests for office to apartment conversions, if they're on the second floor?
Yes.
Yes.
I can think of one right now.
Yes, I know where you're going, yes.
Why do you raise eyebrows?
Just because it's an application,
We were just talking about it before,
Yeah.
before the meeting started, that's the only reason.
But one of the things that I've seen, and again, being a resident, I walk the village a lot. My wife and I walk around a lot in the village. One of the things that when I first moved into the village, you had an insurance agent who was I believe, on the corner of Maple and Main. You had that insurance agent there. You had an individual office here. You had a lawyer's office there. You don't have COVID changed that.
I know.
Why pay for an office when I can sit at home and save the cost of an office? I don't agree with it, but that's what's changing. You know, when a small insurance agent, you know, he can work from home and get what he's got to get done. People don't, and computers changed everything, where you had to go in and sign everything. Now you DocuSign everything, or you email everything in. So those necessity for brick and mortar has sort of gone away. And again, as we were just laughing about, we're seeing people that there's an application in front of the village now, in front of my board now, for a mixed use. So it's changing from a complete office to mixed use. You know, it's still pending, and it hasn't had a decision made on it because there were some things that needed to be cleared up. But
One other question. Have the developers basically shown no interest in condos or co-ops? They're just a faster cash return on an apartment?
Yeah, I'm not really sure, because I'm not a developer,
But typically, we haven't seen many of them lately.
you can't get the yield. I think what I've heard is you can't get the yield. We don't have any more big pieces of property. Like you have Town and Country, you have Highlands, which are big condo complexes. But to get the money out of that, you'd have to create. It's about quantity and lot size. You can't. I think Highlands has 228 units in it. no one could ever build 228 units and defer the cost. So the apartment is the quick turnaround. And now with workforce housing, you're getting in, they're getting funded, they get money from Suffolk County, am I right in saying that? Right, workforce housing, money comes from Suffolk County or New York State? IDA.
Some state money too.
Right.
There's a project to redevelop, I don't want to say blighted areas, but,
Right.
you know, to stimulate development in areas that have a lot of vacancies, the state has grant money as
We
well.
don't have a lot of large parcels left in the village. I think one of them is Mary Haven's a big one. But we don't have any other, you don't have any other parcels like that that are ripe to change over or build, you know. Those have all gone away. The village is developed mostly residential in a lot of the areas, but we don't really have, we don't have any big parcels. So to defer those costs to build condos, just not there.
Yet in the city, apartments have become condos.
Yeah, well, you know, but city, everyone's working in the city. You know, I live in the city. I go downstairs. I go to work. Here, you have to draw. You know, and there's also parking requirements. That's another. Parking. We all have the same problem. You know, I think we could build 1,000 more spots, and we'd still need 200 more. You know, so.
And a big decline in retail too. I mean, we have developers in these projects come in and say, we know you want retail on first floor, but we can't get a tenant. I mean, Conifer.
Right.
First Conifer is there's a dance studio going in now, right? From what I see. So times changed, particularly in the last 10 plus years. I mean, things have changed a lot.
The update was 2024, is that correct? I mean, 2014?
I think
I
it
seem
got
to remember
adopted
that
by
date.
the state, but essentially you have to think of it as a 2010 plan, because that's, 2030 plan, because
Yeah.
that's when it was developed for the year 2030.
Yeah, I remember reading it. It
So-
said the 2030 plan updated 2014.
Yeah, it was adopted probably 2014 by the state. It has to get adopted by the state, so that takes a little time, gets sent to Albany, gets reviewed by the state, gets adopted.
But it's the one online, basically.
It's the one, that's a current.
Marilyn?
So, I heard you regarding the financial implications of these developments, that you can't override the cost that they require to build these apartments. But I wonder, should we then find a way of changing the way we tax residences? Because one residence is the equivalent of what the shipyard, I think, of what they pay in terms of taxes. So I'm really concerned about that as well. If we're not gonna have individual houses going up and just apartments, how do we draw from that?
Well, to talk about individual houses, we really don't have any empty lots unless there's someone who owns a lot that wants to subdivide it. We do have a few oversized lots in the village that, as residents are either aging out, they may sell their property and get subdivided. But as far as the taxing structure, I really can't honestly give you a good answer on that. I don't want to even attempt to explain how we would tax or change the tax on the residents to make that work. So I'm not going to attempt to do it and give you a bad answer. I apologize.
I don't know if this is the forum or if you'll have any information, but you mentioned Mary Haven as the last big lot of real estate for development. Is there any, can we be updated on what's happening there?
Well, it's interesting, because I don't think the planning board ever got a submission on that, ever. So we just read about it the way you read about it, maybe. So we never got even a we're talking about plans there, what could go there, were discussions, but we never saw an application.
There were a few people that came into the planning board and made inquiries, but there wasn't a formal submission that I'm aware of that was made, you know.
Not that I remember.
So I don't think either one of us, we don't even know if
We're waiting,
Yeah.
we're reading of it, something's gonna come in, but we don't.
Something's gotta come in. hasn't
Right.
it?
No.
Thank you.
I was wondering, the comprehensive plan that we're working under this time for Upper Port, that, as you said, things have changed so much and there's so much more traffic. And the lanes have been narrowed down in two places to one lane for traffic continuing. And since I live and I travel very frequently on Main Street to 112. Several times, I mean, it's not a rare occurrence that there's no room for the ambulance who's going to Mather that expanded their emergency services. They expanded to meet the needs, but that roadway is not meeting the needs for transportation at this point. So with further apartments coming on board according to the plan, what is being taken into consideration for traffic control or lanes that you can go, because if you go on North, before you get to North Country, one is a left turn lane, there's only one lane to go. They're cutting through, now we have Station, they can come through that, but before it's backed all the way up. So are there any plans in either changing codes, changing plans, something on the planning board, wherever it is, as far as easy traffic, even for those people, the fire departments from Terryville that come also, and all those ambulances that are coming to Mather?
Yeah.
They don't come all the way down. I live on Myrtle Avenue. They're not coming down to Myrtle Avenue. They're all bottled up there. And so sometimes the ambulances don't even
Well,
get
that's why they're
through.
cutting down Station now. Station has been
But
I live up in that area.
yeah, it's
And they
used
cut the
very
Station of
frequently.
Perry, depending on what the
But
traffic is.
sometimes, even before you get there, you know that it's backed up and many lights before the whole area that will be developed, which was Port Jeff Station, that whole housing project, commercial, right? Those two lights on Cherub Lane, and you can't move. You can't move. There's emergencies there, right, coming into the village, around and up there. We're dead in the water.
Do you have
So
comments on
anything-
that?
Yes.
Well, your wheelhouse is mine, right? So.
You can try.
Sorry about that.
I'll take a zoning question.
You got no question.
So what the comprehensive plan does, I mentioned traffic improvements, and it determines, it's, as part of the comprehensive plan, there's a generic environmental impact. So it's, because when you do a plan, you have an area that's barely developed, like Uptown was, in terms of new things that come in. You make an estimate in there of how many apartments, how much traffic, what traffic improvements are needed. So you make an estimate, that comes in. Whenever you have a significant size project, like each apartment building that comes in, we'll ask for a separate traffic study. So this is specific now. You're asking the developer to do a traffic study on the roads that provide access to each site. So they have to really update, and it's really good because it already, you may have one or two developments that are already in. So.
What about our major one, 112?
Have you ever got
Well-
a traffic study that said there will be an impact? Because all of the ones that I've seen, it says no impact, no significant impact, no significant impact, no
Well,
significant
if
impact.
the person preparing the study writes it for a developer, you might see that more often than if an independent person reviews it. Now, we get the traffic studies on the planning board, the large ones get reviewed, and I typically do them because that's my area of expertise. So I'm on that side of the fence now, the municipality, and I'm reviewing it and saying, nice try. There's room for some assumptions when we do a traffic study. Like a developer would say, hey, I assume there'll be 3% trucks coming to my property.
I understand.
Yeah.
Kanye,
But-
I want to believe the thing, but.
Can you speak up? Because it's hard to hear.
I
Can you speak up?
I sure will. My hearing aids are making me sound. Okay. So, what is existing now, let's not even see further development with the new North One. That sidewalk is so narrow. If you want to make this walkable village, and I travel very early in the morning, up and down, and there are people who are coming from the train station to the ferry, and with their luggage. That whole sidewalk is what, about 4 feet? I mean,
It's at
if
least
someone
5
jumps
feet,
the
yeah.
curb there and there's a lot of traffic, this will be an awful seen there. So I'm just concerned with the future. We can't widen 112 now, or Main Street, whatever we
Right.
want to call it. And so how can we minimize the impact of more these buildings here and more traffic and how to get to emergency services and protect pedestrians? So I think that's the horse before, we have to put the horse in front of the cart now. Say we could build all these wonderful things, but then if you can't move and people are in danger, it's not good. That's my concern.
Yeah, well, that's something for every major project that gets looked at, again.
But the village at this time does not have, it's not looking at this overall concept of traffic and the impact on traffic as a secondary, not in your department or your department, but something to really look at. That's quality of life, walking.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. And that's something that's come into more concern recently in the last 15,
Yeah, I
20
agree.
years. Walkability, crosswalks, pedestrian safety, things of that nature.
And
Bikes-
since it's a
bikes
major
as
road
well.
to the ferry, you can't have it like a little residential street. So I think it takes, the village should be looking into something to look into this issue.
Al?
I have a question about the requirements of the village with regard to your planning. Whenever the village cuts down trees or does some planning, do they bring it to you to see if it's okay?
Village, typically not.
Okay, because we have a major erosion issue on the cliff that was caused by the village onto my property and 2 other properties with huge gorges being formed. What they did was they cut down a whole forest of trees to make pickleball courts. They never put in pickleball courts, but the whole western parking lot drains into what used to be a forest, and it didn't go onto the cliff. Since they cut down all those trees, there's a void property, and it's eroding 6 to 8 foot ditches into the side of the cliff. And it's going to damage assets if it continues. Why can the village cut down a whole forest when I had to have an arborist do a plan for me to cut down 7 trees that could have fallen on my house? Question.
Yeah, as far as I know, because we haven't seen it, I don't know that we get any tree clearing plans submitted, prepared by village forces for the village.
Why?
So, and what you're talking about, the erosion, I know that's a consideration of the bluff project that's being studied. I don't really have any familiarity.
Well, I sit on that committee, so that's why I know.
Yeah, we didn't have any input in them.
But in the future, should it not be necessary in the code for the village to meet the same requirements as a citizen in building or planning?
It could be, yeah. Now, I don't know if the village has a large property. I mean, anytime you clear, I believe the code says you clear more than 2 trees on your property that are of 9-inch diameter, measured about, 4 feet off the ground. If you have more than 2, you need a permit.
Exactly.
So you have to submit an application. Now, if the village is clearing a decent-sized parcel that they own or different decent areas, should they be required to actually, should the requirements be less? When I say less, I mean, let's say they're clearing, a large area. Do they need to get a permit really, or should it just get reviewed and say, hey, this is a lot of trees. Maybe you want to clear this other area where you're not clearing the trees or less trees.
Well, because the result was so catastrophic, something should be done in the future so that they cannot do that. Because for a board or a mayor or somebody to say, we're going to clear this acre of property next to the cliff and destroy the cliff without giving it a second thought, that should never happen.
Yeah.
And so where do we go to make that not happen in the future?
Start with the village board.
With the village board?
Yes, the mayor may have a comment.
The mayor knows all about this. I don't know about the requirements. I never asked her about that. Just because you're here, I thought about it. What do you think, Mayor?
Brilliant.
Shouldn't we have that requirement?
I think every single piece of building we build and every tree we take down.
Even on the golf course?
We need to consider
Yeah.
the, what the impact could be on the environment. And so you need a secra to clear all those trees to build a pickleball court, right? You normally would. Why wouldn't you? Am I wrong
Where do
about
we-
that? I'm not a.
Where do we go to put that in a regulation or a code or a?
Make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees through the Erosion Commission. Why not?
Very good. Thank you.
Any more questions or comments? Please.
This is sort of
And
demonstration.
this young upstart citizen is here as in the function of a citizen, right?
I'm a Civic Association member.
Perfect. I
I
just
have a
want to
question.
clarify.
Can you take us through the process that the planning board went through to approve the Conifer One design? And let us know or describe the impact that the planning board has on design for as-of-right building. And can you impact how that building would have looked, or what the west and east sides of Main Street will end up looking like as the comprehensive plan continues to be implemented?
Okay, so when the comprehensive plan was developed, I recall that it was, as I mentioned before, retail or office on the first floor, apartments above. 2 stories of apartments above. You can get a 4th story if you set the story back so that you're not walking down Main Street saying, oh, I feel like I'm in a tunnel. I've got these giant buildings and I'm kind of like staying away from them because it's almost like a tunnel, a funneling thing. So the 4th floor it can be approved if it's set back. I think it's 10 feet from the 3rd floor. So you have floors 1, 2, and 3 on the street here, and the 4th floor back. And also, I think there's a public amenity associated with the 4th floor. The developer would have to provide some type of public benefit, which is not specified in detail. It's just that, excuse me, have to provide a benefit to get that bonus floor, so to speak. Height is determination up in the uptown became a consideration because you have a sloping property. So how do you measure when you start your first floor at the top here and you get down the road and you've got another story? You know, how do you say where's the first floor of this building? Is it the partially, you know, the part of the building that's down halfway down the street, or is it the part that's really the 2nd story that's on the ground here? So there's a way to measure that, which got really complicated, and that was a consideration of Conifer One as well. And again, Conifer got approved, but the developer ran into difficulties trying to rent retail tenants. Now, you know, how did they pursue that? Did they pursue it, you know, pretty extensively? Is the rent that they're charging ridiculous? Because, you know, and I can't find anybody to come in here. Well, what's your rent? You know, this is an area maybe your rent's too high. We have no control over that, but the intent was to make that all retail. And the signs have been up with realtors for years. And I'm surprised to see the dance studio, which isn't really a retail use. I don't think it's
It's a gray area.
It's like a,
may need an interpretation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did they come in front of you for that?
Well, not for the dance studio, but Conifer One did come in front of us. And just to speak to Lauren's question is, when the developer comes in, he comes in with, and I'm over exaggerating, I want 10 floors, 800 apartments. I want to be right up on the street. I want no parking, and we all hear that. We all read the same articles, and you know, and then they go to the planning department. The planning department says, well, that's not going to work. They cull it down to what fits in the code, then it'll go to the planning board. The people on the planning board will then say, well, if you do this, we may not need so much parking. If you don't put it all the way up on the street and you set it back, we have a walkable community. They massage the project to make it more village friendly, taking in the ARC's comments, the public, you know, they'll take a overwhelming project, bring it down to a manageable project, and then at some point they may say, okay, Mark, your board needs to look at it, and we need to either give them a variance for height, property line, setbacks, whatever they deem is an appropriate project that they'd like to see go forward. But that whole time, they're taking your comments in and all the other commission's comments in, or who are all village residents. There's not outside companies, they're all volunteers like you guys are. And then we'll take those comments, and then Ray's board will take them into consideration, everything from color to siding to roof type to, you know, like you see more of that than I do, right?
Yeah.
But they really do a good job bringing a monster of a project down to more village friendly. And if you really look at the Conifer project, I think it's a big improvement to what was there. You've now got Station Road, which is an access to behind takes you out to Oakland over there. The building itself is pretty. I've been in the village over 20 years, so I've seen so I think it's a big improvement. As far as the first floor and renting, you know, could be a number of reasons, like Ray said.
Is that building occupied? It doesn't appear to be.
All I can tell you is I see lights on, I see people going in and out. You know, how much is rented or who's in there, I can't tell you. It might be 2 people for all I know, it might be 200, you know.
And another thing, the village code has requirements for the size of an apartment, or minimum size of an apartment. So a developer can't be squeezing in college dorm rooms and saying, these are apartments. You need to meet the requirements for a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom apartment, have size requirements in terms of square footage, livable square footage.
Kathleen?
So when all is said and done, and you guys do all your work, and a building goes up. Now, to me, I disagree about Conifer. Coming out of the train station, when I see that, to me, it looks like an eyesore. And I know there was an awful bar there, and I agree with that. But looking at it even architecturally, if you can call it that, it's like they put it together with any old pieces they had. Like the front looks one way, and then on the side, all of a sudden the color changes. It just doesn't. That's just an aesthetic. But at the same time, I know that we were promised, or the village was promised, that there was going to be some open space. And instead, and I don't see anybody there anymore, but at times when I did, there'd be like a woman sitting in a wheelchair at the train station, or someone sitting on the curb. There wasn't any open space. So my question for you guys is, after you've done all your work, and then this building goes up, what recourse do we have when they don't follow the guidelines that were set by the plan in your department and your department, and they say, oh yeah, open space, yeah, there's a terrace on the 3rd floor, which I think that's what I heard. So I don't know, there never seems to be any repercussions after your jobs are done. Where do we go for recourse when they don't follow the rules, and it doesn't serve the public good?
Well, like I said, you're right. I mean, what's the public space there? The Gito brothers' first building, 10, had actually rehabbed or rehabilitated, I should say, the Texaco Park there. And did a nice job on it. So that was their public amenity or public thing. I don't recall Conifer what it was, or if they just paid a fee for that. And that's another thing. Parking. You say, hey, they were probably short some parking spaces, even though they have parking underneath. Were they short any? I believe they were, and they pay what they call a payment in lieu of parking fee, PILOP. So we call it PILOP, payment in lieu. So they're allowed to pay an amount of money and not have to build parking spaces. And that money should go in a fund, so that eventually, if multiple developers do this, you have a good deal of money, you can buy some land for a parking lot and have parking for all that area. That's the intent of the
just get back to the traffic studies briefly. Do you require the developers to produce a traffic study for estimated time of completion, then ETC plus 20?
You've been reading some traffic studies.
And when a building faces a state road, what's the state DOT's involvement? And if he has like a breakdown in traffic, is he required to do mitigation to keep the project going forward?
Yes. Yes. The design year for traffic is usually, typically 20 years after the project is built. So that accommodates some traffic growth each year, anticipated, and DOT, state DOT, has growth factors that they publish. So a developer takes that and says, hey, I got 100 cars when I finish construction and the building's totally occupied. What you know, I got to look at now 20 years hence, maybe I have 120 because I grow 20% or the actual traffic on the road goes 20%.
Yeah, level of service on the road.
The level of service,
estimated.
he's been reading studies.
Right, get his number. We gotta get him for a board. Make sure you get him for a board.
So basically, they're holding their own. They can. I haven't seen many traffic improvements up there.
The Gitos put in a left turn lane. You were talking about only having one lane there. A left turn lane on Main Street took away some parking on the east side, just approaching North Country Road and Sheep Pasture.
Oh, that was
So
for the hills?
That was for that project, right. Now they have to do a new traffic study because they've got a couple of projects in the works, but they'll have to update that. So
That's the Baxter.
The Baxter, right. The Baxter, though, we recommended, there wasn't a tremendous traffic increase because all their traffic's gonna come out on Texaco, okay? So we said, just look at a couple of intersections, like North Country in Maine, because everybody looks at that, because that's what backs up. So, and also coordination of the traffic signals is important. Now, I think you mentioned south of the tracks in the town of Brookhaven. The traffic signals at Cherub by the 7-Eleven and Halleck are supposed to be connected so that when you're traveling on, I have to use two routes now, 112 because it ends and it becomes 25A. If you're traveling north, you should only stop at one of them. Those signals should turn yellow at the same time. And then the side roads get green lights, and then the main road gets green, like both together. The village has written a letter to the state. The state said, oh, we came out, we fixed it. It was a coordination problem. Well, they didn't fix it. And every time I go through there, I'm not very happy.
You never get both green.
Yes.
No, it's random.
I did once, many years ago.
You marked it on your calendar.
Yeah, it's a momentous time in my life.
It's random.
Okay.
It was so strange because if you're coming out of Cherub and you're going to go into Port to make that red.
Yeah.
If it's a red light at Cherub and you wait, this is the wrong time because it's a minor street. But as soon as it turns green, it's red on the
Yeah.
cross street, so you can get caught right in the middle of 112. Because the turn,
Yeah, that's,
right, and
That's-
then there's the second light there.
yeah.
Did you? So
And if you're at Carvel on a Wednesday night, you're never getting out of there.
All righty, one more question?
Wednesdays. I just want to follow up with what Kathleen was just talking about. How could the residents, the village, the planning and zoning board change the fact that if you want the developer to give help with green space, public space, to give back to the community, that they shouldn't get away with paying a dollar amount to not do it? Because that's part of why, it's like the deal, we need something back. You're taking away, trees possibly, places for the water to seep in possibly, so that there's not more flooding. So
Can I
how do you, yeah.
I'll let you off the hook a little bit here, is that,
Okay.
if you know a project's like Conifer 2
Right.
is in the works.
Right.
And I'm just gonna say, for an example, you want a public improvement project that involves the village parking lot behind it, just, I'm throwing very random
Right,
out.
right.
You can either go to the village,
Right.
Board of Trustees, or go to the planning department, write a letter as a civic group saying, we would like to do this, and maybe the developer can absorb some of the costs, like we did with Texaco. Texaco, they fixed
Right.
up the Texaco Park.
Right.
I'm sure the village had input on that, I'm sure, you know,
Right.
and say, we want to approve a sidewalk for walkable communities, or we want to connect A to B, but we don't have a sidewalk there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's a way of doing that, you know, or improving something, adding a crosswalk somewhere, that it's part of the walkable communities, like Ray said before. Biggest thing with walkable communities is sidewalk, pedestrian poles, maybe putting a pedestrian pole there, or some type of blinking sign that says slow down, you know. Those are things as a civic, you should be writing letters to the planning board if you know a project is coming in and you have something in the area that you're concerned about. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but maybe they'll help you either defer cost, or if it's a minimal cost, maybe that could be their public benefit to help satisfy a requirement of the planning board.
And as I said, we'll have public hearings on some of these large projects. That you should come down
Yeah, how do, so we
and
just
make that
have to
comment.
find out when they are by
Right.
going on,
They're advertised,
on
I mean,
the
everything.
public
all
notices,
The agenda's
publics.
up on the website.
Agenda.
At least, I think it's 3 or 4 days before the meeting.
Right.
Okay.
So it's usually,
There's a meeting printed for the year, there's a calendar for the year, so you can find out what
yeah,
it
the
is.
dates are on there.
You're
but-
basically inviting us to come out and hang out with you.
We
for
would love,
every hearing?
absolutely, I would, you know, but
Thank you.
I would say to you, the applicant wants to make the community happy.
Yeah,
Because if you're not happy, you're gonna come out and
Right.
rail against it, go to the Board of Trustees.
right.
So it's your advantage to get some, and I don't wanna, be careful how I say it, it's in your best interest to see what a public benefit could be if there's a
Right.
community like the walkable communities,
Right.
and you wanna see road improvements to help walking from section A to section B, maybe they can either help defer costs, or they could do the benefit, and they wanna keep you happy, because then you'll support their project, idealistically, so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, now we have more questions, right?
Yeah.
1, 2, and then we're wrapping up.
If it took 4 years for the state to approve of our 20-year plan, in other words, our 2010 plan was approved in 2014, should we not start in 2026 to develop the plan for 2030?
Well, it didn't take the state 4 years. The state's approval, I think, was 6 months maybe, but the plan was late because there was actually a lot of public opinion in terms of, I was originally on the committee for the plan. I stayed on for a while, and then I didn't like the direction it was heading in, so I took off. But I was still involved in the planning board in terms of giving input. So it was late because, and yes, we should start a couple of years at least, because it'll take a couple of years to do the plan, and probably a year to, maybe a year or more to get a grant. I would recommend the village applies for a grant.
So
who's got the money to do that?
Is it your
We're
committee?
talking-
Is it your committee that works on the plan? The trustees?
Trustees would.
So we should request, so when do you think they should start that?
Probably want to start it,
Yes,
2 years from now, 2027.
2027. So maybe we should
I
request.
see a hand up in the back of the room.
What do you think, Mary?
So I'm gonna step out of my civic association membership role.
Yes.
And go into my mayor role.
Okay, we love it.
So, the number of apartments that are proposed to be appropriated in the comprehensive plan are 308 on the east side and 108 on the west side, for a total of 416 total. So I don't know how many are in the hills yet, so I'm not really sure. But, Al, what I would say is, if Ray wants to lead up the new review of the comprehensive plan, I think he's a great candidate. I wonder why he stepped aside in the first place. I would love to hear that story, but I don't see why we wouldn't start working on creating a planning commission for the next level of comprehensive plan, because Andy Freeling actually is looking at the comprehensive plan. He's sort of measuring, you know, where are we and how far do we have to go, and you know what can be improved, what can be changed, and I think we have an opportunity soon to start looking at the next iteration of a comprehensive plan, because we see how things are going now, and do we like it? Do we think it's headed in the right direction? Are buildings being designed the right way? Some are, some aren't. You know, what are our options up there now that we see how things are sort of evolving? And people are interested. People are very interested. Now, maybe they were in 10 when it started, or 2007 or 8 when it started, 2007 or 8 when it started. But I think it is, we have an opportunity to get started at some point in the near future.
The last question of the,
I work for Suffolk County Legislator Steve Engelbright, and we've been asked to give a letter of support by Community Development Long Island for it's called Port Jefferson Commons building. Is that another conifer project?
Port Jefferson Commons and Port Jeff Station, I think.
I think it's, one's crossing.
That's in Port Jeff Station.
Port Jefferson Commons, that's Port Jeff Station?
Yeah.
Okay.
It should be the building that is next to Conifer's first building, between there and Perry Street, that is on the verge of, we've already approved it. We approved it a while ago. They're in the process of satisfying all the conditions of approval. As we say, hey, there's 22 things you have to do before you can get a building permit. So they're down to the final wire. In fact, they're on the planning board agenda Thursday night. I think the last couple of items, yeah.
So they're asking for a comment, and then we reached out to the civics to see if
Yeah, that's. I don't want to say it's a done deal, but it's on the verge of.
I think Fred,
getting a building
too, when you're asking about the Commons project, which is in Port Jeff Station.
Right. I mean, I was at the one across the.
The Commons is where Planet Fitness is. Isn't it?
Yes,
That's the
the
Planet
post
Fitness
office,
property
yeah.
now.
Oh, I'm sorry. And
Yeah, I wasn't sure which one.
Yeah, that's station.
Yeah, it is. This is talking about Port Jefferson Commons represents high-quality affordable housing, ongoing municipal revitalization efforts in the village of Port Jefferson.
Yeah, that's
Conifer's
Conifer's second building.
It's Conifer 2,
Yeah.
and I think it goes by that terminology. It has been known as that.
So it's not in the village, or it is in the village?
It is.
It's in the village, it's on the north side of the railroad track.
Yeah, but it's on the verge of, I mean, it's been approved, it's on the verge of satisfying all the approval requirements, so it's, you know. But there are others coming. And there's coming, others coming on, across the tracks.
Chance for input from the legislature.
I think they know.
DiBiase was already fully, like, they just need to.
They're in the process of doing their final conditions, so yeah, it's too late.
And where is that going exactly?
It's next to the existing building by the tracks. So the space between there and Perry Street is another building. They have the whole block.
Is there any space between? Is it gonna be
No.
space
No, it's all
between
gonna be
buildings?
In fact, there's a connection, I believe, on the those walkway corridors connect.
So they just
They're merging all
received,
those lots.
a 9% low-income housing tax credit.
That sounds like it.
Yeah, that's, Conifer specializes in developing low-income housing on Long Island. So that's-
Wonderful. Please, let's thank our guests
Yes,
today.
thank you so much.
We appreciate your input. We need to clear this space at 8:30 today. 8:45 is the absolute latest. We have the invitation to attend the board meeting.
Absolutely.
All right.